I'm a big Syd Banks fan. For me, I wouldn't be doing this work without Syd Banks and what he brought to the world and how he delivered it. I really give gratitude to him, on a daily basis, because I think for me, Syd's work and the ripple effect of that work allowed me access to something that I may not have tried to get access to, because when we talk about the equanimity question, I didn't think I was good enough for a spiritual awakening. I didn't think that that was something that I could access. There were too many rituals and form and stuff, and so religion was outside of my reach. And what I feel that Syd Banks brought to the world was a simplicity about how we work. And part of that is the essence of how we work, and one might call that spiritual, or, we have all sorts of words for it. For me, there's a complete juxtaposition of both what Syd Banks brought to the work and the way that we teach this understanding, and the form of research, in the same way that I might have form in a curriculum or form in a program that I've written. It's no different, or form in a book that I might write. To me, it's exactly the same thing. But I really would love to hear maybe Jeanne comment on, like, where do you see the alignment or not?
Thank you. I love this question. Okay, so first of all, I just want everybody to know I read Syd, I listen to Syd. I know they're like, oh no, she's a researcher, she doesn't know anything about spirituality. That's not true. Okay, there's actually a whole field of researchers who are like, yeah, spirituality exists, that's a thing. So I don't want you to think just because the popular language in scientific communities that's very verbal and out there is that there is no spiritual. That's actually a relatively small group of people, ironically, just in terms of the research into what scientists actually believe. So having said that, there are avenues for exploring things like this, even though we can't ever prove or disprove, at least I don't know, a way that we could measure like spirituality or measure God or something like that, right? So what's good about that is it kind of takes that whole thing off the table for me as a researcher. I don't have to worry about that. I can have my own beliefs about that, and that's mine. I get to have that, and nobody gets to say that's bad or good. And for me as a researcher, what I do is I say, well, we do have this thing called human experience. And not everybody in the research community is in agreement on this, right? But there are researchers like me who's like, we have this thing called human experience. And human experience is something that can be shared. I can ask you about your experience. You can talk about your experience. One of the things I would love to do for my dissertation is if anybody has a video recording of Syd Banks talking about his mystical experience, right? So he had this, what we call some researchers have called a quantum change or a mystical type insight. He has described that type of insight. So you could go around and interview people who have had mystical, insightful experiences. You can write them down, and you can talk about what's the same and what's different about those experiences. And that's research, right? That could be a pretty rigorous research project. Now, that doesn't mean you're proving that mystical experiences happen. What you're proving is that people have this experience, right? And then so for my project, for my dissertation, I was really interested in this kind of insight that's more developmental, not this mystical insight where you experience something bigger than you kind of coming into you, more like an insight like, oh my gosh, I didn't know the world worked that way. Wow, that changes everything, right? And I was really interested in that. And so part of the research we did in Nottingham was for me to come and interview some of the men on their specific moment of experience of insight. And so what I'll do with those interviews is I'll look at them for common structures. So I'll look like what I remember. I haven't done the analysis yet, but what I remember is a lot of them talked about maybe, being in their bunk, just like hanging out in their bunk, and like having some busy, upsetting thinking, playing sort of a video, in their minds, things like that, and then all of a sudden having this new thing, this new experience happen inside of them. And so what I'll do is I'll take those interviews and I'll look and see, like, was this a common experience? Did a lot of people have like an opening up sensation or a lightening sensation? Was that part of their developmental insight where they just had an experience where they had new thought and the old thought fell away and the old behavior fell away and something was significantly different for them? So that's just one kind of research. There's lots of different ways to explore the human experience, and the human experience is valuable. That's the other thing I really want to say. Up until we started being interested as researchers in the human experience, we left that out. Right? So you would go to your doctor and they wouldn't ask you how you're feeling, and they wouldn't find out anything about your subjective experience. They would take your measurements, they would prescribe your drug or whatever. And they wouldn't know that that drug had a really bad effect on you and you felt very depressed afterwards because they didn't ask, right? So what started happening in the qualitative research world, where they wanted to know about the quality of your experience, is researchers started asking people and people started writing down their experiences. Oh, this is what this disease process was like for me. And guess what? When doctors started reading human experiences, they started changing their practice. They started incorporating care for their patients. They started asking, oh, you have this debilitating physical disease. How are you getting to the hospital in a way? Who is helping you structurally? What kind of support do you need, right? These are important medical questions. And so qualitative experiences give us a view into what kind of support people need, what kind of changes we should do to our care. And it's an essential part of any research process.